In the vast expanse of the Galactic Coalition, where 1,000 alien civilizations bowed to the supreme military might of the apex hegemony, one species remained conspicuously absent from their ranks: humans. Not because they were forbidden, but because they were deemed too primitive, too emotional, too chaotic to serve alongside the galaxy's elite warriors. The Krillian battlemasters laughed at human recklessness. The Vorthan strategists dismissed human unpredictability as a fatal flaw. The crystalline Zephyrites considered human emotions a mental disorder that disqualified them from serious military consideration. But in the deepest corners of space, where pirates and rogue fleets terrorized innocent worlds, where the Coalition's perfect armies failed again and again against unconventional threats, a desperate apex commander would soon discover that everything the galaxy thought it knew about humans was catastrophically wrong. Her name was Sarah Chen, and she was about to prove that sometimes the most underestimated force in the universe is the one that refuses to follow the rules everyone else considers sacred. The galaxy was about to learn why humans had never needed anyone's permission to become apex predators. The recruitment station on Nexus Prime buzzed with the controlled chaos of 1,000 different species trying to prove their worth to the apex hegemony. Sarah Chen stood in line behind a towering Krillian warrior, whose bioarmor gleamed like polished obsidian, and in front of a cluster of insectoid Zent, whose compound eyes tracked every movement with mathematical precision. She was, by every measure that mattered to the galaxy's most elite military force, utterly unremarkable. At 5'6", she barely reached the chest plates of most alien recruits. Her brown hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. Her olive skin bore no ceremonial scars or biomodifications, and her clothes were standard civilian issue from Earth's agricultural colonies. She carried no weapons, displayed no obvious augmentations, and showed none of the ritualistic posturing that marked serious military candidates. The other recruits largely ignored her, which suited Sarah fine. She had learned long ago that being underestimated was often the greatest advantage of all. Commander Vex Delanus of the Apex Hegemony stood at the registration podium, his forearms moving with mechanical precision as he processed applications. His species, the Vorthans, were renowned for their tactical genius and cold logic. Everything about his bearing suggested barely contained disdain for the parade of would-be warriors before him. Next, his voice resonated through universal translators with the authority of someone accustomed to instant obedience. The Krillian stepped forward, his massive frame casting shadows across half the registration area. Keth Bloodrender, third son of War Chief Malik, veteran of 17 campaigns, bearer of the Crimson Talon. His credentials rolled off his tongue like an incantation. The bioarmor on his chest displayed holographic representations of his kills, battles, and honors. Commander Vex barely glanced at the displays. Approved for advanced combat assessment. Report to Bay 7. The Krillian nodded and strode away, his heavy footsteps echoing through the chamber. The Zenth cluster moved forward as one unit, their spokeswoman chittering their collective achievements in rapid musical tones. Within moments, they too were approved and directed to specialized tactical evaluation. Then it was Sarah's turn. She approached the podium with measured steps, neither hurrying nor dawdling. Every instinct told her that this moment would define everything that followed. Name and qualifications, Commander Vex said without looking up from his holographic displays. Sarah Chen, formerly of the Earth Agricultural Development Corps. This got his attention. 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern across his elongated skull, focused on her with laser intensity. Earth Agricultural Development? His translator couldn't quite hide his incredulity. This is a military recruitment station, human. The Apex Hegemony does not recruit farmers. The Earth Agricultural Development Corps included planetary defense responsibilities, Sarah replied evenly. We were tasked with protecting agricultural worlds from raiders and hostile wildlife. Against what? Grain beetles and crop thieves? A ripple of what might have been laughter passed through nearby recruits. Sarah's expression didn't change. Against the Draconis Syndicate primarily. Also rogue AI swarms, bioweapon outbreaks, and 3 separate incursions by species the Coalition couldn't identify.
Commander Vex's secondary arms stopped that data entry.
Draconis Syndicate operations are classified above civilian clearance levels. Yes, sir. Which is why the Agricultural Corps used volunteer units with military backgrounds. Deniable assets for situations too sensitive for official Coalition response. Sarah reached into her jacket and produced a data crystal that gleamed with security encryption markers. My service record, declassified per Coalition Freedom of Information statutes as of yesterday. For the first time since Sarah had entered the recruitment area, Commander Vex gave a human his complete attention. He inserted the crystal into his reader and watched as holographic displays materialized around him. Whatever he saw there made his postural spine stiffen. This indicates you personally led operations against Syndicate heavy raiders. 15 successful engagements over 3 years. With what support? Agricultural Corps Volunteer Unit designation, Stubborn Mules. 43 personnel, standard civilian equipment retrofitted for combat operations. The other recruits had stopped their own conversations to listen. The idea of civilians engaging military-grade pirates seemed absurd to warriors trained from birth for combat. Commander Vex scrolled through more data. Your unit operated without official military support or coalition backup? Correct. Our mandate was to protect agricultural worlds that didn't qualify for official coalition military protection. We made do with what we had. According to this, your unit maintained a perfect mission success rate. 0 friendly casualties over 3 years of active operation against pirates using military-grade equipment and starships. We were very careful, sir. Careful. Commander Vex's translator made the words sound like a foreign concept. Human, do you understand what the Dracona Syndicate represents? These are not simple pirates. They employ ex-coalition military personnel, stolen military technology, and bioweapons banned under 17 different galactic treaties. Yes, sir, which is why we had to be creative in our response methodologies. Creative. Another pause. Explain. Sarah considered her words carefully. The Syndicate relied on standard military doctrine adapted for piracy operations, overwhelming force, technological superiority, and terror tactics. Their success came from fighting enemies who tried to match them strength for strength. And you did not?
We couldn't afford to, sir.
So we didn't try to fight their strengths. We targeted their weaknesses, which were arrogance mostly, predictability. The assumption that anyone they couldn't immediately overpower wasn't worth taking seriously. Around the registration area, conversations had stopped entirely. Even species, who typically ignored humans, were listening to this exchange. Commander Vex leaned back in his chair, which creaked under the shifting weight of his armored form. Your record indicates that your final engagement with the Syndicate resulted in the capture of a Dreadnought-class raider intact, along with its entire crew. Yes, sir. A Dreadnought-class raider is a capital ship, human. It carries a crew of over 800 and enough firepower to level a small moon. How exactly does a volunteer agricultural unit capture such a vessel intact? Sarah's lips quirked in what might have been a smile. Very carefully, sir. That is not an adequate explanation. With respect, Commander, if I detailed our operational methodology, it wouldn't work anymore. The Syndicate shares intelligence across all their operations. Our techniques remain effective precisely because they're not widely known. Beck studied her for a long moment. Around them, the recruitment station had fallen silent, except for the hum of life support systems and the distant rumble of starship engines.
You realize, he said finally, that Agricultural Corps service carries no weight in Apex recruitment evaluation.
Your background suggests competence in unconventional warfare against pirates, but the hegemony faces threats far beyond anything your Corps has encountered. I understand, sir. Do you? The Apex hegemony protects over 1,400 worlds across 47 star systems. Our enemies include rogue AI collectives with processing power beyond organic comprehension, hive mind species that can coordinate billions of units instantaneously, and energy beings that exist in dimensions our science can barely map. We face threats that would reduce most coalition military units to atomic vapor before they could react. Yes, sir. And you believe your experience fighting pirates qualifies you for membership in the galaxy's premier military organization? Sarah met his gaze steadily. I believe my experience fighting impossible odds with inadequate resources might be exactly what you're looking for, sir. The silence stretched until Commander Vex's primary arms resumed their data entry. Standard evaluation protocol for humans is psychological assessment followed by basic combat trials. However, given your service record, I am authorized to offer enhanced evaluation options. What would those involve? Direct placement in active training cohorts with other Apex candidates? Full tactical assessment under combat simulation? Failure rates approach 90% for experienced soldiers from established military species. And for humans? No human has ever attempted enhanced evaluation. Most wash out during basic psychological assessment. Sarah nodded. I'd like to attempt enhanced evaluation, sir. Why? Because if I'm going to fail, I'd rather fail doing something worthwhile than waste everyone's time pretending basic evaluation would tell you anything useful about whether I can handle real combat. Commander Vex's translator caught something that might have been approval in his voice. Enhanced evaluation begins in 6 hours. Report to Training Complex Delta, Level 94. Bring only essential personal items. Everything else will be provided or is forbidden. Yes, sir. One more thing, human. His four eyes focused on her again. Enhanced evaluation is not merely difficult. It is designed to break candidates who think they understand what military service means. If you proceed with this choice, you will be competing against the finest warriors of dozens of species, many of whom have been training for combat since before you were born. They will not show mercy because you are human, and neither will the assessment protocols.
I understand, sir. Do you?
Because once you enter that assessment, withdrawal is not permitted until completion or complete failure. If you cannot handle the pressure, if you panic under fire, if you prove unable to function as part of an Apex tactical unit, it will be noted permanently in your record. No military organization in the coalition will accept you for any role above civilian contractor. Sarah considered this. Around her, other recruits waited for her answer with the patient attention of predators watching potential prey. Sir, with respect, I didn't travel halfway across the galaxy to take the easy path. Very well. Commander Vex made final notations in her file. Report as instructed. Dismissed. As Sarah walked away from the registration podium, she could feel dozens of alien gazes tracking her movement. Conversations resumed in clicks, whistles, roars, and musical tones, but she caught enough translated fragments to understand the general theme: human attempting enhanced evaluation. Certainly brave, if foolish. Agricultural background against Apex candidates. This should be amusing. She made her way through the sprawling corridors of Nexus Prime toward the temporary housing assigned to evaluation candidates. The station was a marvel of engineering, large enough to house 3 million beings comfortably, with artificial gravity systems that could accommodate dozens of different physiological needs. Her quarters were small but adequate, with a single bed, storage unit, and access terminal. She had 6 hours to prepare for the most challenging evaluation the Apex hegemony could devise. Sarah sat on the edge of the bed and pulled out a small, battered notebook. Inside, written in careful handwriting, were observations and techniques developed over 3 years of fighting impossible odds against better-equipped enemies. Not standard military doctrine, but something uniquely human, the distilled wisdom of someone who had learned to win not through strength but through understanding. She reviewed her notes on psychological warfare, misdirection, tactical improvisation, and what she privately called productive paranoia, the art of assuming your enemy was always more dangerous than they appeared, while simultaneously remaining confident in your ability to find their weaknesses. The Agricultural Corps had taught her many things the standard military academies never covered: how to fight when you were outnumbered, outgunned, and operating without support, how to turn enemy advantages into weaknesses, how to make allies out of desperate situations. Most importantly, how to make your enemies underestimate you right up until the moment you prove them catastrophically wrong. 4 hours before her evaluation began, Sarah's door chimed. She opened it to find a young Tyrellian standing in the corridor. The reptilian being's scales showed the nervous color patterns of extreme anxiety. "You are the human attempting enhanced evaluation." His universal translator carried a slight accent that suggested formal education. "Yes. My name is Senth Corval. I am also scheduled for enhanced evaluation." He paused, clearly struggling with what to say next. "I wanted to speak with you before the assessment begins." Sarah gestured for him to enter. Senth's species were known for their mathematical brilliance and cautious nature, definitely not typical Apex recruits. "I have been studying enhanced evaluation protocols," he said, settling uncomfortably on her room's single chair. "The assessment is designed around competitive scenarios. Candidates are divided into temporary units and assigned tactical objectives that require direct competition for limited resources." Makes sense. They want to see how we perform under pressure against competent opposition. Yes, but there is more. Since scales shifted to patterns that indicated serious concern. The scenarios are specifically designed to exploit species-typical weaknesses. Krillians face challenges that require patience and subtle thinking. Vorthans must navigate situations where logic alone is insufficient. Humans. He paused. What about humans? According to available data, human candidates are typically assigned scenarios that emphasize individual action over team coordination. The assessment protocol assumes humans will prioritize personal survival over unit objectives when faced with extreme danger. Sarah leaned back against the wall. "And you're telling me this because I have studied human military history extensively. Your species' actual combat record suggests the assessment assumptions about human behavior are significantly flawed." "How so?" Senth's scales brightened with the patterns that indicated academic excitement. Human military doctrine consistently emphasizes unit cohesion over individual survival. Your species demonstrates statistical abnormalities and willingness to accept personal risk for group benefit. The assessment protocols appear to be based on stereotypes rather than empirical analysis. Sarah smiled. So you think the evaluation might be designed to make humans fail based on incorrect assumptions about how we actually behave? Precisely. And if that is true, then standard preparation strategies may be insufficient. What are you proposing? Cooperation. My species excels at tactical analysis and long-term planning, but we are less effective under immediate physical threat. Your species demonstrates adaptability and tactical innovation under pressure that could complement Tyrellian strategic thinking. Sarah studied the young alien carefully. You're suggesting we form an alliance. I am suggesting we pool our strengths to overcome evaluation protocols that may be biased against our species' actual capabilities. It was an interesting proposition. Alliance building wasn't explicitly forbidden in the evaluation guidelines, but it wasn't common practice either. Most candidates relied on individual performance or stayed within species groupings. What makes you think the evaluation will allow for that kind of cooperation? Senth produced a data pad and called up holographic displays showing evaluation statistics. Historical data suggests successful Apex candidates demonstrate not only individual competence, but also ability to integrate with diverse tactical units. The evaluation scenarios are competitive, but they also test adaptability and strategic thinking. So you think they want to see who can think beyond the obvious parameters? Exactly. And I believe both our species are significantly underestimated in this evaluation system. Sarah considered the proposal. Everything she knew about Tyrellians suggested they were careful, methodical thinkers who rarely acted without extensive planning. Their reputation for mathematical brilliance was well-deserved, but they were also known for avoiding high-risk situations. On the other hand, Senth was right about human military history. Humanity's most significant military achievements had come through cooperation, innovation, and willingness to take calculated risks for strategic advantage. All right, she said finally, but if we're going to work together, we need to understand each other's capabilities clearly. No assumptions, no stereotypes, just honest assessment. Agreed. They spent the remaining 3 hours reviewing each other's backgrounds, discussing tactical philosophies, and developing basic coordination protocols. By the time the announcement came for all enhanced evaluation candidates to report to Training Complex Delta, Sarah felt confident they had established a foundation for effective cooperation. The training complex was vast, with ceiling-to-floor holographic displays showing real-time data from dozens of simultaneous evaluation scenarios. Candidates from 17 different species stood in formation before a massive podium where Apex instructors waited. Sarah recognized some of the other candidates from the registration area: Keth Bloodrender, the massive Krillian warrior, the Zent Collective, several Vorthan tactical specialists, and others she didn't recognize but who carried themselves with the unmistakable bearing of professional soldiers. She and Senth took positions near the rear of the formation, which put them in visual contact with most other candidates while keeping them out of immediate attention. The lead instructor was a being Sarah didn't recognize, humanoid but covered in what looked like living metal that shifted and flowed across his skin. When he spoke, his voice resonated directly through the complex's structure. Candidates, you have chosen Enhanced Evaluation for Apex Hegemony Service. This assessment will test not only your individual capabilities, but your potential integration with the most elite military organization in known space. The metallic instructor's surface rippled with patterns that might have been writing. Enhanced evaluation consists of 5 phases: tactical assessment, strategic planning, combat simulation, crisis response, and final integration testing. Failure at any phase results in immediate dismissal. Questions? No one spoke. Excellent. You will be divided into mixed species tactical units for the first 4 phases. Unit composition is not random. You have been grouped based on psychological profiles and tactical assessments to maximize potential for both success and educational value. Sarah felt a chill of apprehension. If the instructors had access to detailed psychological profiles, they would know about her conversation with Senth. Either they approved of alliance building, or they were setting both of them up for failure. Unit assignments are as follows. The instructor began reading out team compositions. Sarah listened carefully, noting which candidates were grouped together and looking for patterns. Krillians were paired with tactical specialists. Zent collectives were mixed with individual-oriented species. It appeared the instructors were deliberately creating teams that would be forced to overcome significant coordination challenges. Unit 7. Senth Korval, Tyrellian Tactical Analyst. Sarah Chen, human adaptive specialist. Beth Carrick's Altarian precision combatant. Sarah glanced at Scent, who signaled with a slight scale color shift that he was pleased with her assignment. Beth Carrick's was unfamiliar, but Altarians were known for their exceptional reflexes and marksmanship skills. Unit assignments are final, the instructor continued. You have 30 minutes to meet with your assigned teammates and develop basic coordination protocols. First evaluation phase begins immediately thereafter. As the candidates dispersed to find their team members, Sarah felt a familiar sensation, the calm focus that always preceded challenging operations. Everything around her seemed to slow slightly. Sounds became more distinct, and her awareness of spatial relationships intensified. It was time to show the galaxy what humans could actually do. Beth Carrick's moved like liquid mercury poured into the shape of a warrior. Her species, the Altarians, were humanoid but stretched and refined, with elongated limbs that suggested speed and precision. Silver hair fell to her shoulders like spun metal, and her eyes were the pale blue of distant stars. When she approached Sarah and Scent, her movements were so fluid they seemed almost choreographed. I am Beth Carrick's, formerly of the Altarian Precision Strike Corps, she said, her voice carrying the slight musical quality common to her species. I assume you are my assigned teammates? Sarah Chen, Earth Agricultural Development Corps. Scent Corval, Turellian Strategic Analysis Division. Beth's expression didn't change, but something in her posture suggested surprise. Agricultural Development and Strategic Analysis? This is an interesting team composition for enhanced evaluation. Deliberately so, I suspect, Seth replied, his scales shifting to patterns that indicated analytical thinking. The instructors appear to be testing cross-species cooperation under tactical pressure rather than simply evaluating individual combat performance, which means our success will depend on how effectively we can integrate our different capabilities, Sarah added. What's your background? 17 years active duty, specialized in long-range elimination and reconnaissance. My unit operated primarily in contested space, conducting precision strikes against high-value targets in environments where standard tactical approaches were impractical. Sarah nodded approvingly. So you're used to working with limited support in hostile territory, correct? Though I typically operated alone or with other Altarians. Cross-species cooperation is not common in precision operations. It will be here, Sarah said. What do you know about enhanced evaluation protocols? Beth produced a small holographic display that showed tactical schematics. Based on available information, the first phase will be tactical assessment through competitive scenario simulation. Teams will be assigned objectives that require direct competition for resources or territory. Success depends not only on completing objectives, but demonstrating adaptive tactical thinking, meaning they want to see how we respond when our plans encounter unexpected complications, Sarah summarized. Precisely, Scent added. I have analyzed historical evaluation data. The scenarios are designed to escalate rapidly beyond initial parameters. Teams that rely solely on pre-planned approaches typically fail when forced to adapt to changing conditions. Around them, other teams were engaged in similar planning sessions. Sarah could hear fragments of conversation in multiple languages and translation protocols. Most teams appeared to be focusing on establishing command hierarchies and assigning specialized roles based on species capabilities. That's interesting, she murmured. What? Beth asked. Most teams are organizing around species specializations. Krillians taking point positions, Vorthans handling tactical coordination, energy beings managing technical systems. Standard military doctrine, Beth agreed. Utilize each member's natural advantages. But look at what that means for team dynamics. Sarah gestured toward the nearest team, where a massive Krillian warrior was explaining assault tactics to two smaller aliens who looked distinctly uncomfortable. The Krillian assumes command because his species produces natural leaders. The others defer to his experience and physical capabilities. Sense scales brightened with understanding. But what happens when the scenario requires capabilities the Krillian doesn't possess, or when his leadership style proves inappropriate for the specific tactical challenge? Exactly. They're optimizing for known scenarios instead of adaptability. Beth studied the other teams with new attention. You're suggesting we should structure our team differently? I'm suggesting we focus on adaptability rather than predetermined roles, Sarah replied. Each of us brings specific expertise, but we should be prepared to shift leadership and tactical approach based on what each scenario actually requires. That is highly unconventional, Beth said slowly, which might be exactly what they're testing for. A chime sounded through the training complex, signaling the end of coordination time. The metallic instructor's voice resonated from speakers throughout the facility. Phase 1, tactical assessment begins now. Teams will be transported to individual simulation environments. Your objective will be communicated upon arrival. Remember that you are being evaluated not only on mission success, but on tactical innovation, team coordination, and adaptive thinking. The floor beneath their feet began to glow, and Sarah felt the familiar disorientation of transport beam activation. Reality blurred around the edges, colors shifted through spectrums her eyes weren't designed to process, and then everything snapped back into focus. They stood in what appeared to be an abandoned mining facility on an asteroid. The environment was convincingly real: low gravity, thin atmosphere, and a constant background hum of life support systems struggling to maintain habitable conditions. Through transparent aluminum windows, Sarah could see the star field beyond the asteroid's jagged surface. A holographic display materialized in the center of the facility's main chamber. The voice that accompanied it was neutral, without species identification. Unit 7. Tactical Assessment Scenario 3 Alpha. This facility contains a prototype quantum communication array capable of instantaneous communication across galactic distances. Your objective is to secure the array and maintain control for 60 minutes, while preventing other teams from accomplishing the same objective. The display showed a three-dimensional map of the facility. It was larger than Sarah had initially realized, with multiple levels, interconnected tunnels, and what appeared to be several entrances from different asteroid faces. Additional parameters. The facility's life support systems are damaged and will fail completely in 90 minutes. The quantum array is functional, but requires manual activation and maintenance. Environmental hazards include unstable artificial gravity, radiation leaks, and structural collapse zones. Sarah studied the tactical situation quickly. Secure and hold a position for 60 minutes against unknown opposition, in an environment that was actively trying to kill them while managing a complex technical system none of them had training on. Questions? The holographic display asked. How many other teams are competing for the same objective? Beth asked. That information is classified until contact is made. What are the parameters for mission success? Senth inquired. Continuous control of the quantum array for the full 60-minute duration. Control is defined as having at least one team member in direct contact with the array's primary interface. Are there restrictions on tactical methods? Sarah asked. No methods are forbidden within standard Apex operational parameters. Lethal force is simulated but recorded for evaluation purposes. The display disappeared, leaving them alone in the abandoned facility with 60 minutes to accomplish an objective that required them to fight off unknown numbers of competitors while keeping complex equipment running in an increasingly dangerous environment. Beth immediately began checking her equipment. As a precision specialist, she carried a modified energy rifle designed for long-range engagement, along with sensor gear and specialized ammunition. Senth produced a portable tactical analysis unit that would let him monitor facility systems and track environmental changes. Sarah's equipment was notably different. Instead of specialized weapons, she carried a standard energy sidearm and a collection of tools that looked more suited to engineering than combat. Initial assessment, Sarah said. We're facing a multi-objective scenario with unknown opposition, time pressure, and environmental hazards. What are our priorities? Secure the quantum array first, Beth replied immediately. Without control of the primary objective, everything else is irrelevant. But we can't maintain control if the facility becomes uninhabitable, Senth pointed out. Environmental management has to be a parallel concern. Both valid, Sarah agreed. But I think we're missing something important. Which is? We don't actually know what control means in practical terms. The array requires manual activation and maintenance, but by whom? Do any of us have quantum communication training? Veth and Senth exchanged glances. I have basic technical training, Veth said slowly, but nothing specific to quantum arrays. My background includes systems analysis, Senth added, but that's primarily mathematical modeling, not hands-on operation. So we need to assume that the array's operation is either simple enough for general military personnel, or the evaluation includes technical challenges that test our ability to learn critical systems under pressure. Sarah moved toward the facility's main computer terminal, which means our first priority should be understanding what we're actually supposed to do with this thing once we secure it. She activated the terminal, which displayed a schematic of the quantum communication array. The system was indeed complex, but the interface had been designed with clear operational protocols. Activation required a specific sequence of commands, while maintenance involved monitoring quantum entanglement stability and adjusting field harmonics as needed. It's manageable, she said after studying the display. but it requires constant attention. Someone needs to stay with the array once it's active. That leaves 2 people for facility defense against unknown numbers of competitors, Beth observed. Unless we think tactically instead of conventionally, Sarah replied. She called up a facility map and overlaid it with life support schematics. Look at this. The facility has multiple entrance points, but they all converge on central areas where the life support systems maintain atmospheric pressure and artificial gravity. Seth studied the display, his scales brightening with understanding. You're suggesting we control the facility's environment rather than trying to defend against direct assault. We can't know how many competitors we're facing or what their capabilities are, but we do know they all have the same basic physiological requirements.
Environmental warfare, Veth said slowly.
Create conditions that favor our position rather than engaging in direct confrontation. Right. And if we can make the facility actively dangerous for anyone who doesn't know how to manage the systems properly, we convert the environmental hazards from a shared problem into a tactical advantage. Sarah began pulling up more detailed schematics. The life support systems are damaged but functional. If we can identify which systems are most critical and gain manual control over them, we can create zones within the facility that are either safe or extremely hazardous depending on our needs. That's significantly more complex than standard tactical approaches, Seth pointed out, but it plays to our actual strengths instead of trying to compete with other teams in areas where they might have advantages, Sarah replied. Veth, you're used to precision operations in hostile environments? Seth, you excel at systems analysis and long-term planning. I have experience making inadequate resources accomplish impossible objectives. And if this approach fails, Beth asked, then we fall back to conventional tactics. But if it succeeds, we'll have accomplished our mission using capabilities that other teams probably aren't prepared for. A distant vibration ran through the facility's structure, followed by a red warning light activating on the main terminal. Sarah checked the display quickly. External docking clamp activation. We have company. How many? Beth asked, moving immediately to a position with clear sight lines toward the facility's primary entrance. Unknown, but they're using the main airlock. Professional approach. Sarah turned to Seth. Can you get started on environmental system analysis? I want to know exactly what we can control and how quickly. Immediately. Seth began connecting his portable analysis unit to the facility's central computer. Sarah moved to a secondary terminal and began the quantum array activation sequence. If they were going to implement environmental tactics, they needed to secure the primary objective first and ensure they could maintain it while managing the facility's systems. The array hummed to life with a sound like distant thunder. Holographic displays materialized around the central control interface, showing quantum entanglement patterns that resembled three-dimensional spider webs made of pure mathematics. The system was beautiful in its complexity, but the interface was clear enough that she could monitor its status while handling other tasks. Array is active and stable, she announced. It's sent? What do we have for environmental control? Extensive options, he replied, his scales shifting to patterns that indicated excitement. The facility's automation systems are designed for emergency management. I can control atmospheric pressure, artificial gravity fields, radiation shielding, and temperature regulation on a room-by-room basis. Veth, what are you seeing? 3 figures in powered armor moving cautiously through the main entrance. Kryllian energy signatures on 2, unknown species on the 3rd. They're advancing in standard military formation. Perfect. Sarah pulled up a tactical display that combined the facility map with environmental controls. Zenth, can you increase radiation levels in the main corridor while maintaining safe conditions in the central facility area?
Yes, but it will take approximately 3 minutes to implement safely.
Do it, Veth. Can you establish overwatch on the quantum array chamber while staying concealed? Already in position. Sarah activated a facility-wide communication system. Attention, competing teams. The quantum communication array is active and under our control. The facility's life support systems are failing faster than predicted. For your own safety, please be aware that radiation levels are increasing in multiple facility sections. You're warning them? Veth asked through their team communication channel. I'm giving them information that's technically accurate but practically misleading. They'll assume the radiation increase is part of the environmental hazards mentioned in the scenario parameters, not deliberate tactical action on our part. Through the facility's internal sensors, Sarah could see the Kryllian team's progress had slowed considerably as they began checking for radiation exposure. Their sensors would confirm that radiation levels were indeed increasing, exactly as she had announced. Psychological warfare, Seth observed approvingly. By appearing to offer assistance, you've made them more likely to trust subsequent information, and established us as the team with the best understanding of facility systems, Sarah added. which means they'll expect us to know about other environmental hazards. The quantum array required her attention for a moment as entanglement stability fluctuated slightly. The system was designed to be manageable, but it definitely needed continuous monitoring. She made the necessary adjustments and returned to the tactical display. Senth, can you route primary life support to the quantum array chamber and create dead zones in the outer facility sections? Yes, but that would make approximately 60% of the facility uninhabitable. How long would it take for someone to override your environmental controls if they reached the primary computer terminals? With standard military technical training, approximately 8 to 12 minutes. Sarah smiled. Then let's make sure they can't reach those terminals safely. Over the next 20 minutes, Unit 7 transformed the abandoned mining facility into an elaborate tactical maze. Senth used his system's expertise to create safe corridors that led toward the quantum array chamber while making alternate routes increasingly hazardous. Sarah coordinated their environmental warfare with intelligence gathered from the facility's sensors, tracking competitor movements and adjusting conditions to channel them into predictable patterns. Veth provided precision overwatch, using her advanced sensor equipment to monitor competitor locations while remaining ready to engage if environmental tactics proved insufficient. The Krillian team made steady but cautious progress through the facility, moving slowly enough that Sarah's team had time to adjust environmental conditions ahead of their advance. 2 more teams entered the facility through secondary airlocks, but the environmental hazards forced them to move even more carefully as they tried to navigate increasingly dangerous conditions. 30 minutes remaining, Sarah announced, as the quantum array required another stability adjustment. How are we doing on environmental control? Maintaining effectiveness, Senth replied. All 3 competitor teams are making progress toward the central area, but their advance rate has been reduced by approximately 70% due to environmental navigation requirements. Any indications they've identified are environmental modifications as deliberate tactical action? Negative. Sensor data suggests they're interpreting the environmental challenges as part of the scenario parameters. Sarah checked the facility's overall system status. Life support was holding steady in their controlled areas, while becoming increasingly problematic in the zones where competitors were operating. The quantum array remained stable and under their control. Veth, are you ready for direct engagement if environmental tactics become insufficient? Prepared for precision strikes on any competitor team that reaches the central facility area, she confirmed. Remember, we don't need to eliminate them completely. We just need to prevent them from maintaining contact with the quantum array. As if summoned by her words, warning indicators began flashing on Senth's tactical display. Problem, he announced. One of the competitor teams has stopped advancing toward the central area. They're establishing a position in Section 7 and appear to be attempting to access secondary facility controls. Sarah pulled up the relevant displays. A team she didn't recognize had taken position in what appeared to be the facility's backup command center. If they managed to override environmental controls from there, Unit 7's tactical advantage would disappear rapidly. Can you prevent them from accessing those systems?
Not without compromising our own control interface.
The secondary systems are designed as backup controls for emergency situations. Sarah studied the tactical situation. Environmental warfare had been effective for controlling the pace of engagement, but now they faced a direct challenge to their tactical approach. Veth, can you reach Section 7 without compromising overwatch on the quantum array? Negative. Section 7 is beyond effective range, and the route would take me through areas where we've created environmental hazards. Senth, how long before they can override our environmental controls? Unknown, but they appear to have technical expertise, potentially as little as 10 minutes. Sarah made a decision that would have seemed insane to conventional military thinking, but felt perfectly logical given their current situation. We're changing tactical approach. Senth, I want you to shut down environmental controls entirely and restore normal facility conditions. Both her teammates began to object immediately. That eliminates our primary tactical advantage, Veth pointed out. It allows all competitor teams to advance rapidly toward the quantum array. Senth added. Yes, Sarah agreed. Which is exactly what I want them to do. She began entering commands that would reconfigure the facility's systems in ways the instructors definitely hadn't anticipated. Trust me, she said, as alarm indicators began flashing across multiple displays. We're about to show them what humans do when everyone thinks they understand the rules. Sarah's fingers moved across the facility control interface, with the confidence of someone who had spent years making broken systems do impossible things. What she was attempting had never been tried in any military academy simulation, for the simple reason that it violated every principle of sound tactical thinking. She was about to turn the quantum communication array itself into a weapon. Sarah, Veth's voice carried the controlled tension of a sniper who could see disaster approaching. Whatever you're planning, we have less than 8 minutes before multiple teams reach this chamber. Plenty of time, Sarah replied, pulling up technical specifications for the quantum communication array. Senth, I need you to help me understand something about quantum entanglement fields. Senth's scales flickered between analytical patterns and warning colors. This is not the time for theoretical physics discussions. Trust me, it's exactly the time. The array maintains quantum entanglement through controlled field harmonics, correct?
Yes, but
And those field harmonics have to be precisely calibrated to maintain stable communication links across galactic distances?
Obviously, but Sarah, if you're considering what I think you're considering, the risks
Are manageable if we're smart about it. The quantum fields extend throughout this facility to maintain signal coherence. If I modify the harmonic frequencies slightly, you'll create quantum field distortions that will interfere with any electronic equipment within the facility's operational radius,
Gent finished, his scales now showing patterns of pure horror.
including our own equipment and potentially our biological nervous systems. Only if I do it wrong. Sarah began entering modifications to the array's configuration. But if I do it right, we create a defensive field that makes it impossible for anyone else to use their equipment effectively while keeping ours operation. Veth's targeting scope showed her the first competitor team approaching the central facility area. Whatever you're going to do it now. We have incoming. Sarah activated the modified quantum field configuration. The change was immediate and dramatic. Throughout the facility, every piece of electronic equipment not hardened against quantum interference began experiencing what could politely be called technical difficulties. Communication devices produced static that sounded like the death songs of digital ghosts. Sensors began reporting readings that contradicted basic physics. The quantum communication array itself, however, continued operating normally. Sarah had configured the modifications to create destructive interference patterns everywhere except in the immediate vicinity of the array's primary interface, which meant Unit 7's equipment remained functional as long as they stayed close to their objective. Brilliant, Senth whispered, his scales now showing patterns of profound admiration. You've created a zone of technological denial that protects our objective while degrading enemy capabilities. And it looks like a malfunction rather than deliberate action, Veth added. They'll assume the quantum array's activation has created unexpected side effects. Through the facility sensors, which were hardened against quantum interference by necessity, Sarah could see the competing teams struggling with their suddenly unreliable equipment. The Krillian team had stopped their advance entirely while they attempted to diagnose what they assumed were equipment failures. The other two teams were having similar problems. How long can we maintain this? Senth asked. Indefinitely, as long as the quantum array stays active and stable. The field distortions are actually parasitic on the array's normal operation. They'll continue as long as we maintain control of the primary objective. Sarah was beginning to relax when her displays registered something that made her blood run cold. One of the competitor teams was continuing to advance despite the quantum field interference. Problem, she announced. Team 4 is still moving toward us. Their equipment appears to be unaffected by the quantum distortions. Veth adjusted her scope to track the approaching team. Confirmed. 3 figures in powered armor, but the armor configuration doesn't match standard military designs.
And Senth pulled up what sensor data he could gather despite the interference.
Energy signatures suggest artificial beings, synthetic or cybernetic forms that may not rely on conventional electronics.
AIs?
Sarah asked. Possible, or heavily modified beings using quantum-hardened systems. This changed everything. Sarah's tactical approach had been based on the assumption that all competitors were using standard military equipment vulnerable to quantum interference. If Team 4 had technology that was immune to her countermeasures, Unit 7's defensive advantage disappeared. Estimated time to contact? She asked. 4 minutes, Veth replied, and they're moving with perfect coordination. No hesitation, no uncertainty about navigation. They know exactly where they're going and how to get there. Sarah studied the tactical display looking for options. The facility's environmental systems were back to normal operation. The quantum field denied conventional equipment use to most competitors, but Team 4 was immune to their primary defensive measure. New plan, she announced. We're going to do something so unexpected that even AIs won't see it coming.
Which is, Senth asked, we're going to surrender the quantum array.
Both her teammates began protesting immediately, but Sarah was already implementing her new strategy. She began shutting down the quantum communication array's primary systems while configuring the field distortions to collapse in a specific pattern. Sarah, surrendering the objective means mission failure, Veth pointed out with the patience of someone explaining basic concepts to a child. Not if we retake it within the required time frame, Sarah replied. And not if we can do it in a way that eliminates all remaining competitors simultaneously. She pulled up facility schematics and overlaid them with power distribution patterns. Sent, when the quantum array shuts down, the field distortions will collapse. But the collapse will create a massive electromagnetic pulse throughout the facility's power systems. Yes, which will disable all electronic systems, including our own. Unless we're prepared for it. Sarah began disconnecting her equipment from the facility's power grid and switching to independent power sources. The EMP will last approximately 30 seconds. During that time, the facility will be completely dark and every piece of electronic equipment will be non-functional. Except ours, Beth said slowly, understanding beginning to dawn. Exactly. We'll have 30 seconds of complete technological superiority, while everyone else is operating blind. But 30 seconds isn't enough time to eliminate multiple competitor teams, Senth pointed out.
No, but it's enough time to do something much more effective. Sarah called up the facility's life support displays. Remember, the original scenario briefing mentioned that life support systems would fail completely in 90 minutes.
We're at about 60 minutes elapsed time, which means the automated safety systems are already compensating for progressive system failures. If we trigger a facility-wide emergency shutdown during the EMP, the safety systems won't be able to compensate, Beth realized. The entire facility will become uninhabitable within minutes, which means all teams will be forced to evacuate except the one that knows how to restore life support systems quickly enough to survive. Senth's scales showed patterns of awed respect. You're gambling that our technical expertise will allow us to restore minimal life support faster than other teams can evacuate the facility. I'm gambling that while other teams are trying to figure out what happened and whether they should retreat, we'll be securing the quantum array and establishing conditions that make it impossible for anyone to challenge our control. Through the sensors, she could see Team 4 approaching the final corridor, leading to the quantum array chamber. In 2 minutes, they would be in direct confrontation with Unit 7, and the outcome of that confrontation was far from certain. Decision time, Sarah announced. We can try conventional tactics against unknown opponents with superior technology, or we can change the rules of engagement entirely. Do it, Beth said without hesitation. Agreed, Senth added, though I hope you've calculated the risks correctly.
So do I, Sarah replied, and triggered the quantum array emergency shutdown.
The collapse of the quantum fields created exactly the electromagnetic pulse she had predicted, but the experience was far more dramatic than any of them had anticipated. Every light in the facility died instantly. Every display went dark. Every sound of electronic systems ceased, leaving them in absolute silence and darkness for exactly 30 seconds. Sarah counted the time in her head while implementing the facility shutdown sequence she had memorized from the safety protocols. In the absolute darkness, she could hear the sounds of confusion and alarm from other locations in the facility. Equipment being dropped, voices calling out in multiple alien languages, the sound of someone falling as they tried to navigate without functioning sensors. 28 seconds, 29, 30. Emergency lighting activated throughout the facility as backup power systems came online. Sarah immediately began the quantum array restart sequence, while Senth worked on restoring selective life support to their immediate area. Array restart in progress, she announced. SM, life support status. Facility-wide systems are offline, but I can maintain atmospheric pressure and temperature in this chamber for approximately 40 minutes. More than enough time. VEF, competitor status. All teams appear to be withdrawing from the facility. Sensors are detecting movement toward external airlocks. Sarah allowed herself a moment of satisfaction as the quantum array came back online. The restart process took exactly 3 minutes, during which time all competing teams would have to decide whether to continue pursuing an objective in a facility that was rapidly becoming uninhabitable, or retreat to safety. Quantum communication array restored and stable, she announced. We now have effective control of the objective with 43 minutes remaining in the evaluation period. But even as she spoke, her sensors detected something that suggested their victory might be premature. Team 4 had not retreated with the other competitors. Instead, they were holding position in the facility's main corridor, apparently waiting for something. Beth, are you seeing this? Confirmed. Team 4 has taken defensive positions approximately 60 meters from our location. They're not advancing, but they're not withdrawing either.
Senth checked his analysis displays.
Their behavior suggests they're waiting for facility systems to be restored before making their final approach, which means they understand our tactical approach and are prepared to counter it, Sarah realized. They're letting us do the work of making the facility habitable again. Then they'll move to take control of the array. So what do we do? Sarah studied the tactical situation carefully. Team 4 had demonstrated immunity to quantum field interference, patience in the face of environmental challenges, and sophisticated understanding of her unconventional tactics. Whatever they were, they represented a level of opposition that couldn't be overcome through clever technical tricks, which meant it was time for the one advantage she hadn't used yet. We're going to talk to them.
Talk to them?
Beth's voice suggested she thought Sarah had suffered some kind of mental breakdown. Think about it. They've demonstrated superior technology and tactical sophistication. They could have advanced during the EMP period when we were vulnerable, but they didn't. They could have attempted to override our life support restoration, but they're waiting instead. Your point being, they're not trying to eliminate us. They're trying to outthink us. Sarah activated the facility's communication system. Team 4, this is Unit 7. We'd like to propose a discussion. The response came immediately, in perfect coalition standard without any trace of accent or translation artifacts. Unit 7, this is Team 4. We acknowledge your request for communication. What do you wish to discuss? The nature of this evaluation. You've demonstrated capabilities that suggest you could have secured the quantum array at any point during this scenario. Your continued presence implies you're interested in something beyond simple objective completion. A pause. Then, continue. I believe this evaluation is testing more than tactical competence. You're here to see how we respond to opponents who can't be overcome through conventional military approaches. That is an interesting hypothesis. What leads you to this conclusion? Sarah glanced at her teammates, both of whom were following the conversation with expressions of fascination and concern. Because everything about this scenario has been designed to force adaptive thinking over standard doctrine. The environmental hazards, the technical complexity of the objective, the competitive rather than cooperative framework. It's all designed to test how candidates respond when normal military procedures aren't sufficient. And how does that relate to our presence? You represent the ultimate test of adaptive thinking, an opponent that can't be defeated through superior firepower, technical tricks, or environmental manipulation. An opponent that requires a completely different approach. Another pause. What approach would that be? Sarah took a deep breath. Cooperation instead of competition. The silence that followed stretched long enough that she began to wonder if she had made a catastrophic error in judgment. Then Team 4 responded, Unit 7, you are correct, that this evaluation tests capabilities beyond standard tactical doctrine. You are also correct that we represent a challenge that cannot be overcome through conventional approaches. However, your proposal of cooperation raises additional questions, such as, how do you propose to structure cooperation between teams competing for the same objective? Sarah smiled. By recognizing that the real objective isn't controlling the quantum array for 60 minutes, it's demonstrating the kind of thinking that makes someone suitable for Apex hegemony service. She deactivated the quantum array. Sarah, both her teammates shouted simultaneously. Trust me, she said, then reactivated the communication system. Team 4, the quantum array is now offline and available for your control. We're proposing that both teams collaborate to demonstrate optimal management of the facility and its systems rather than competing for exclusive control of a single component. You're surrendering the objective? Team 4 asked. I'm suggesting that the real test is whether we can move beyond the parameters we were given to find solutions that serve the evaluation's actual purpose, which is identifying candidates who can think strategically under pressure, adapt to unexpected challenges, and work effectively with diverse team compositions when standard procedures are inadequate. Team 4's response came more quickly this time. Unit 7, please stand by for consultation. During the pause that followed, sense scales showed patterns of extreme anxiety while Veth checked and rechecked her equipment as if preparing for immediate combat. Sarah, Sense said quietly, if you're wrong about this, we've just handed victory to our most dangerous competitors. And if I'm right, we've just demonstrated exactly the kind of thinking the Apex hegemony actually needs. And if they simply secure the array and maintain control for the remaining 38 minutes, then we'll have learned something important about the nature of this evaluation and we'll be prepared for whatever comes next. Team 4's response came through the communication system with what might have been approval. Unit 7, we accept your proposal for collaborative facility management. Please reactivate the quantum array and assume primary technical responsibility. We will maintain facility security and environmental systems. Sarah began the array restart sequence while trying to process what had just happened. Either she had made the most brilliant tactical decision of her career, or she had just handed victory to opponents who were about to demonstrate why her faith in cooperation was catastrophically misplaced. The quantum array hummed back to life, its holographic displays casting strange shadows across the chamber walls. But instead of the familiar tension of contested control, the atmosphere felt oddly peaceful. Unit 7, this is Team 4, came the voice through the communication system. Facility security is established. Life support systems are stable. Quantum array status? Array is online and stable, Sarah replied. All systems nominal. Excellent. Evaluation protocol completion in 35 minutes. As the remaining time passed, Units 7 and 4 worked together to manage the facility systems with an efficiency that neither team could have achieved alone. Zenth and Team 4 collaborated on environmental optimization. Veth provided overwatch, while Team 4 handled perimeter security. Sarah maintained the quantum array while Team 4 ensured facility stability. When the evaluation period ended, both teams had successfully demonstrated continuous control of the objective while managing multiple complex challenges that would have defeated either team operating independently. The holographic display that announced mission completion carried a message that none of them had expected. Tactical Assessment Phase 1 complete. Units 7 and 4 have demonstrated exceptional adaptive thinking and cross-team cooperation. All team members advanced to Phase 2, Strategic Planning Assessment. As transport beams began to activate around them, Sarah realized that her gamble had paid off in ways she was only beginning to understand. But more importantly, she was starting to suspect that the Apex Hegemony's evaluation process was designed to identify something much more specific than simple military competence. They were looking for people who could redefine the nature of warfare itself. The transport beam engaged and reality dissolved around them once again. But this time, Sarah felt confident that whatever they faced next, Unit 7 was ready for challenges that would require them to think beyond every assumption about how military operations were supposed to work. Behind them, the abandoned mining facility, powered down to standby mode, its quantum communication array waiting silently for the next group of candidates who would have to decide whether winning meant defeating your opponents or finding ways to make opposition irrelevant. In the transport stream between destinations, Sarah could have sworn she heard something that sounded like approval coming from the artificial beings who had become their unexpected allies. The galaxy's most elite military organization was about to discover what happened when humans started rewriting the rules of engagement. The strategic planning facility was unlike anything Sarah had expected. Instead of the sterile military briefing room she was accustomed to, they found themselves in what appeared to be a massive holographic theater where entire star systems rotated slowly in three-dimensional space above their heads. The scale was breathtaking. She could see trade routes represented as streams of light connecting hundreds of worlds, while fleet positions moved in real-time patterns that suggested conflicts spanning dozens of sectors. "Welcome to Phase 2, announced a voice that seemed to come from the holographic display itself. Strategic Planning Assessment. You will be presented with a developing crisis scenario based on actual Apex Hegemony operations. Your objective is to develop comprehensive strategic responses that address not only immediate tactical concerns, but long-term stability and resource optimization." Sarah looked around the facility and realized that the collaborative success of Phase 1 had created an unexpected situation. Instead of being separated back into their original three-person teams, Units 7 and 4 had been combined into a single 6-person strategic planning group. Team 4, as it turned out, consisted of 3 beings who were even more unusual than she had anticipated. They introduced themselves as Operative Synthesis, a collective intelligence distributed across 3 separate bodies. Tactical Analyst Meridian, who appeared to be some form of energy being contained within a humanoid framework, and Strategic Coordinator Nexus, whose species she didn't recognize but whose bearing suggested vast experience in complex operations. An interesting development, Senth observed privately to Sarah and Veth. Combining teams suggests the evaluation parameters have changed based on our Phase 1 performance. Or they're testing how we adapt to larger group dynamics and more complex coordination challenges, Veth added. A holographic display zoomed in on a specific sector of space where red warning indicators were flashing around multiple star systems. Crisis. Scenario. The hegemony protects 47 worlds in the outer spiral region. 18 months ago, a previously unknown species calling itself the Devourers began systematic attacks on frontier settlements. Standard military response has proven ineffective. The display showed battle recordings of Apex Hegemony fleets engaging what appeared to be ships made of living tissue that could adapt to weapons fire in real time. Every time the Hegemony forces found an effective tactic, the Devourer vessels evolved countermeasures within hours. Devourers demonstrate rapid adaptation to all known military technologies and tactics. They appear to consume defeated enemies and integrate their capabilities into their own forces. Conventional military doctrine calls for overwhelming force deployment, But this approach has resulted in providing the Devourers with more advanced technology to absorb and adapt. Sarah studied the tactical recordings with growing unease. The Devourer vessels moved with organic fluidity that suggested intelligence distributed throughout their structure, and their adaptation rates were far beyond anything she had encountered in previous military operations. Current situation, the voice continued, hegemony forces have withdrawn to defensive positions around core worlds. The Devourers have consolidated control over 17 frontier systems and show no signs of slowing their advance. Intelligence suggests they are preparing for a major offensive against hegemony core territories within the next 6 months. Traditional strategic options include massive military escalation using planet-killer weapons, withdrawal from the outer spiral region entirely, or negotiated territorial concession. All 3 options are considered unacceptable by hegemony leadership. The display zoomed out to show the broader strategic situation. The outer spiral region represented a significant portion of hegemony territory, containing vital resource systems and trade routes that connected to the broader galactic economy. Your task: develop a strategic response that neutralizes the Devourer threat while maintaining hegemony territorial integrity and minimizing resource expenditure. You have 2 hours to present a comprehensive plan. As the briefing concluded, Sarah realized they were facing a scenario that was specifically designed to be unsolvable using conventional military thinking. Every standard approach either played to the Devourer's adaptive strengths or required unacceptable costs. Initial assessment, she asked the combined team. Operative Synthesis spoke first. There are 3 bodies coordinating to present information from multiple perspectives simultaneously. Conventional force deployment appears contraindicated. Historical analysis suggests the Devourer's adaptation capabilities make them stronger with each engagement. Energy pattern analysis indicates they operate on principles fundamentally different from known military technologies. Tactical analyst Meridian added, their ships appear to be extensions of biological organisms rather than constructed vessels, which suggests their strategic thinking may be equally non-conventional, strategic coordinator Nexus observed. They may not recognize standard military or diplomatic protocols. Their engagement patterns show no regard for casualties or resource preservation. They're willing to sacrifice entire fleets if it means acquiring new technology or tactical intelligence. That's interesting, Sarah mused. They're treating military engagement as an information-gathering exercise rather than territorial conquest. Sense scales brightened with analytical excitement, which means their actual strategic objectives may be different from what the hegemony assumes. If they're primarily interested in technological acquisition rather than territorial control, then traditional military responses are not only ineffective, they're actually serving the Devourer's purposes. Sarah finished. Every time we engage them militarily, we're giving them exactly what they want.
She began pulling up detailed intelligence reports on Devourer behavior patterns.
Look at this. They attack frontier settlements first, but they don't occupy them permanently. They extract technology and resources, then move on. They're not interested in governing territory or controlling populations. They're hunters, Beth realized. They're treating the hegemony like a hunting ground where they can acquire new capabilities. Which means the solution isn't military, Sarah continued. It's biological. The team gathered around her as she began outlining a strategic approach that had never been attempted in recorded military history. The Devourers adapt to military technology by consuming it and integrating it into their own systems. But that same adaptation mechanism could be their greatest vulnerability. Explain. Strategic Coordinator Nexus requested. What if we don't try to fight them? What if we give them exactly what they want, but we make sure what we give them is precisely what we want them to have? Sarah called up biological warfare protocols from her agricultural core background. In biological pest control, sometimes the most effective approach is to introduce organisms that appear beneficial to the pest species but actually carry hidden disadvantages. Trojan horse tactics, Meridian observed, but applied at a biological level rather than technological. Exactly. We develop technology that appears to be advanced military equipment, but actually contains biological components designed to interfere with Devourer adaptation processes. Operative Synthesis coordinated their response across all 3 bodies. This approach would require detailed understanding of Devourer biological systems, which current intelligence does not provide. Then we get that intelligence, Sarah replied, but not through conventional reconnaissance. We give them something they'll want to consume, and we use that consumption process to study their adaptation mechanisms. She began sketching out a strategic plan that combined elements of biological warfare, intelligence gathering, and what could only be described as evolutionary manipulation. Phase 1. We deployed decoy military technology designed to be captured by devourer forces. But the technology contains hidden biological components that will allow us to study their adaptation processes from the inside. Phase 2. Based on intelligence gathered during Phase 1, we developed targeted biological agents designed to interfere with their adaptation capabilities without threatening their basic survival. Phase 3. We deploy the biological agents through voluntary capture scenarios where devourer forces acquire what appears to be valuable military technology, but actually delivers the agents directly into their biological systems. Senth was following her logic with obvious fascination. The goal isn't to destroy them, but to limit their adaptation capabilities so that conventional military tactics become effective again. More than that, Sarah continued, if we can control their adaptation processes, we can potentially guide their evolution in directions that serve hegemony strategic interests. You're proposing biological manipulation on a species-wide scale, Veth said slowly. That's not just unconventional military strategy. That's playing God with an entire alien species. And the alternative is either abandoning 17 star systems to an expanding threat or escalating to planet-killer weapons that will devastate the entire region. Strategic Coordinator Nexus leaned forward with obvious interest. This approach would require unprecedented cooperation between military, biological research, and intelligence operations. The coordination challenges alone are manageable if we structure the operation correctly, Sarah finished. Remember, we don't need to solve everything at once. We need to create a strategic framework that can adapt and evolve as we learn more about our opponents. She began outlining operational details that drew on every aspect of her background: agricultural pest control techniques adapted for military applications, intelligence gathering methods that used apparent vulnerability as a strength, and tactical approaches that turned enemy advantages into strategic weaknesses. The key is that we stop thinking of the devourers as a military problem and start treating them as a biological challenge. We're not trying to defeat them in combat. We're trying to guide their evolution in directions that serve our strategic objectives. As she continued developing the plan, Sarah realized that her team was creating something that had never existed in galactic military history: a strategic framework that combined biological manipulation, evolutionary guidance, and military tactics into a unified approach. Implementation timeline, Meridian asked. Phase 1 can begin immediately using existing hegemony resources. We need to modify standard military equipment with biological monitoring systems and deploy them in scenarios where devourer capture is likely. Initial intelligence gathering should provide enough data to begin Phase 2 development within 30 days. Risk assessment? Operative Synthesis inquired. Lower than conventional alternatives, Sarah replied. If biological manipulation proves ineffective, we revert to standard military tactics with no greater loss than current operational parameters. If successful, we solve the devourer problem while establishing operational frameworks that could be applied to future unconventional threats. Resource requirements? Minimal compared to military escalation. Most requirements are for research and development rather than fleet deployment. We're using the devourer's own adaptation mechanisms to do most of the work. As the 2-hour deadline approached, their combined team had developed a comprehensive strategic plan that addressed every aspect of the devourer crisis while establishing precedents for handling similar challenges in the future. But more importantly, they had created something unprecedented: a strategic approach that treated biological manipulation as a legitimate military tool, evolutionary guidance as a valid tactical technique, and species-wide adaptation as a manageable operational parameter. When they presented their plan to the evaluation system, the response was immediate and dramatic. Strategic planning assessment complete. Combined team has developed novel strategic framework addressing crisis parameters while establishing innovative operational methodologies. All participants advanced to Phase 3, combat simulation assessment. However, the voice continued, Phase 3 parameters have been modified based on strategic planning performance. Standard combat simulation protocols are insufficient for evaluating candidates capable of tactical innovation at demonstrated levels. Sarah felt a familiar sensation of anticipation mixed with concern. Every phase of this evaluation had escalated beyond their expectations, and she suspected Phase 3 would prove even more challenging than what they had already encountered. Modified combat simulation will test strategic framework implementation under actual operational conditions. You will be assigned temporary Apex Hegemony Authority and tasked with implementing your proposed devourer response strategy using real resources against actual threats. The holographic display around them shifted to show real-time intelligence feeds from the outer spiral region. Sarah realized with a mixture of excitement and terror that they were about to discover whether their strategic innovation could work in the real world. Transport to Operational Command Facility begins in 10 minutes. Prepare for full strategic implementation authority. As she began gathering her equipment and coordinating with her team, Sarah realized that somewhere during the evaluation process, they had stopped being candidates and started becoming something else entirely. They were about to become the people responsible for determining whether the Apex hegemony's approach to galactic security needed to evolve, or whether traditional military doctrine remained adequate for the threats they faced. The galaxy was about to discover what happened when humans stopped trying to fight wars and started trying to end them permanently. Around her, her teammates were preparing for challenges that no military academy had ever conceived of. But Sarah felt confident that whatever they faced in Phase 3, their combined capabilities would be sufficient to prove that sometimes the most effective military strategy was to change the nature of warfare itself. 10 minutes later, reality blurred around them as transport beams carried them toward operational authority over actual Apex hegemony military assets. The evaluation was about to become real, and the Devourers were about to learn what happened when humans decided that adaptation was a game that multiple species could play. The Apex Hegemony Command Ship Inevitable was a vessel that redefined the concept of military power. 15 kilometers long and carrying enough firepower to reduce small moons to their component atoms, it served as the mobile headquarters for operations that could reshape the balance of power across entire sectors of space. Sarah stood on the command deck, looking out through transparent aluminum at star formations that represented the frontier of galactic civilization, and tried to process the reality of her situation. 18 hours ago, she had been a candidate hoping to pass basic military evaluation. Now she held temporary operational authority over military assets worth more than the gross domestic product of most planets. Commander Chen, came the voice of Admiral Cathara, the hegemony's most senior field officer. Your strategic framework has been approved for immediate implementation. You have full authority over Operation Adaptive Response, including deployment of specialized research vessels, modification of existing military assets, and coordination with intelligence operations across 17 star systems. Sarah turned from the viewport to face the Admiral, a being whose species she didn't recognize but whose bearings suggested vast experience in complex military operations. Admiral, I appreciate the confidence, but I want to be clear about something important, which is, I'm not a military commander. I'm someone who learned to solve impossible problems using limited resources. If this operation succeeds, it won't be because I'm following military doctrine correctly. It will be because we're abandoning military doctrine entirely. Admiral Cathara's expression suggested what might have been approval. Commander, the reason you have been given this authority is precisely because military doctrine has proven inadequate for addressing the Devourer threat. The hegemony needs solutions that transcend conventional thinking. Then let's transcend some conventions, Sarah replied, turning to address the combined team that had become her operational staff. Synth, what's the status on our biological monitoring packages? Fabrication complete, the Turellian replied, his scales showing patterns of controlled excitement. We've successfully integrated quantum biological sensors into standard military equipment packages. The technology appears identical to conventional military hardware, but will provide detailed biological data on any organism that attempts to consume or integrate it. Veth reconnaissance assets, 3 stealth ships positioned in Devourer-controlled territory, ready to deploy monitoring packages in scenarios designed to ensure capture. The Devourers should interpret them as standard reconnaissance operations that failed due to equipment malfunction. Perfect. Operative synthesis, intelligence analysis capabilities. The collective intelligence coordinated their response across multiple bodies. Real-time analysis systems are operational. We can process biological data from monitoring packages and develop targeted countermeasures within hours of acquisition rather than the months typically required for conventional research.
Sarah nodded and activated the command ship's holographic tactical display, which showed the current situation across the outer spiral region.
Red indicators marked Devourer-controlled systems, while blue showed hegemony defensive positions. The front lines had been static for months, but that was about to change dramatically. Admiral, I'm requesting permission to implement Phase 1 immediately, but I need to be clear about what that means. Explain. We're about to deliberately sacrifice military assets to an enemy force. From a conventional perspective, this will look like we're feeding resources to the Devourers. Some of your officers may interpret our actions as treasonous or insane. Admiral Cathara studied the tactical display carefully. How do you propose to address potential morale issues? by demonstrating results quickly enough that initial skepticism becomes irrelevant. But it's important that everyone understands we're not retreating or surrendering. We're setting traps that use the Devourer's greatest strength against them. Sarah began outlining the operational details to the command staff, many of whom were species she had never encountered before, but who shared the unmistakable bearing of professional military personnel. The Devourers have adapted to every conventional military tactic by consuming defeated assets and integrating their capabilities. But consumption requires direct biological contact with target systems. Our monitoring packages will exploit that requirement by gathering intelligence during the adaptation process itself. What kind of intelligence? Asked Commander Vex Stellanis, who had apparently been assigned to the operation as senior tactical coordinator. Everything. Biological composition, adaptation mechanisms, communication protocols, command structure analysis, and most importantly, identification of systemic vulnerabilities that exist precisely because of their adaptation capabilities. Sarah called up detailed schematics showing how the monitoring packages would function. The packages are designed to appear as advanced military technology worth acquiring. When Devourer forces consume them, the biological sensors will be integrated directly into their adaptation systems, giving us real-time access to their most sensitive internal processes. And if they identify the monitoring systems? Vex asked. Then we learn something equally valuable about their intelligence capabilities and adapt our approach accordingly. Remember, this isn't a single operation that either succeeds or fails. It's an iterative process designed to gather intelligence regardless of initial outcomes. Strategic Coordinator Nexus leaned forward with obvious interest. You're treating intelligence gathering as a biological function rather than a technical challenge. Exactly. Conventional intelligence operations rely on external observation or infiltration. We're using voluntary consumption to place our sensors directly inside their adaptation processes. They can't detect our monitoring without shutting down the same biological systems that give them their strategic advantages. As Sarah continued explaining the operational framework, she could see understanding and approval spreading through the command staff. What she was proposing wasn't just unconventional military tactics. It was a fundamental redefinition of how intelligence operations could function when dealing with biologically adaptive enemies. Timeline for Phase 1 deployment? Admiral Cathara asked. Immediate. Our reconnaissance assets are already in position, and the monitoring packages are ready for deployment. We should begin seeing initial data within 6 hours. Proceed with Phase 1 implementation. The next 18 hours proved to be among the most intense of Sarah's career. As hegemony forces deliberately allowed themselves to be defeated by Devourer fleets, the monitoring packages began transmitting data that revealed the true nature of their adaptive capabilities. The results were both fascinating and terrifying. Their adaptation isn't just technological, Senth reported, as data flowed in from multiple monitoring stations. They're rewriting their own genetic structure in real time to accommodate new capabilities. It's like watching accelerated evolution happening at the cellular level. More than that, Meridian added, their individual units aren't truly individual. They're components of a distributed biological network that shares adaptation information instantaneously across their entire species. Which explains why they can counter new tactics so quickly, Sarah realized. Every adaptation becomes available to every Devourer unit within hours. But the monitoring data also revealed something the hegemony's intelligence services had never suspected. They're not actually hostile, Operative Synthesis announced. There are 3 bodies coordinating to present analysis from multiple perspectives. Their attacks on hegemony territory are exploratory behavior. They're trying to understand technological diversity across galactic civilization. They're researchers, Veth said slowly, biological researchers studying technological adaptation by consuming and integrating examples of advanced technology. Sarah stared at the data streams flowing across the command display, which means everything we thought we understood about their motivations is wrong. They're not trying to conquer territory or destroy the hegemony. They're trying to learn from us. This revelation changed everything about their strategic framework. If the Devourers were researchers rather than conquerors, then military solutions were not only ineffective but actively counterproductive. New approach, Sarah announced. We're not going to manipulate their adaptation processes to weaken them. We're going to use their adaptation mechanisms to establish communication. Communication? Admiral Cathara asked. They adapt to technology by consuming it and integrating it into their biological systems. What if we give them technology designed specifically for communication rather than combat? Instead of weapons or defensive systems, we provide them with language matrices and cultural databases. You're proposing to establish diplomatic contact through biological integration. Strategic Coordinator Nexus observed. That's unprecedented in recorded galactic history. So is everything else we've done during this evaluation? Sarah replied. The question is whether we want to solve this crisis through military escalation or through establishing the first successful communication protocol with a species that thinks in terms of biological adaptation. Over the following days, Operation Adaptive Response transformed from a military operation into something that had never existed before. A first contact protocol designed around biological integration rather than conventional diplomatic procedures. The results exceeded everyone's expectations. When Devourer forces consumed the specially designed communication packages, they didn't just acquire language capability, they gained access to comprehensive cultural and historical databases that explained hegemony civilization, territorial organization, and peaceful interaction protocols. The first communication from Devourer leadership came through biological integration networks that allowed direct thought transmission rather than verbal or written language. Hegemony civilization, integration successful, understanding achieved, territorial expansion, not intended. Research collaboration, desired, conflict cessation, immediate implementation. Sarah found herself in the unprecedented position of conducting diplomatic negotiations through biological adaptation mechanisms. The Devourers weren't interested in territory or resources. They wanted to study technological diversity, and they had been attacking hegemony settlements because they thought that was how technological species normally shared information. They thought we were deliberately presenting them with technological samples for research purposes, she explained to Admiral Cathara as they reviewed the diplomatic breakthrough. Every time we fought them, they assumed we were offering them new technology to study and integrate, and now they understand our actual territorial and social organization, and they're requesting formal research collaboration agreements. They want to establish joint research facilities where they can study hegemony technology through controlled integration rather than battlefield acquisition. The resolution of the Devourer crisis established Sarah Chen as something unprecedented in galactic military history. A commander who had ended a major interstellar conflict without firing a shot by fundamentally redefining the nature of the threat they faced. Commander Chen, Admiral Cathara said as they stood on the command deck watching Devourer ships moving into peaceful formation alongside hegemony vessels, you have demonstrated capabilities that transcend every category of military evaluation. The Apex Hegemony would like to offer you permanent command authority over unconventional threat response operations. What exactly would that involve? Creating and leading a new division specifically designed to handle threats that can't be resolved through conventional military doctrine. You would have authority to develop whatever operational methodologies prove necessary, with full resource backing from Hegemony Command. Sarah looked out at the starfield where former enemies were becoming research partners and realized that her journey from agricultural volunteer to military commander had led somewhere she had never anticipated. Admiral, I accept, but I have conditions. Name them. My team stays together. Synth, Veth, Operative Synthesis, Meridian, and Nexus. We've learned to work as a unit, and what we've accomplished here required all of our different perspectives. Agreed. And we operate with complete tactical autonomy. If we're going to handle unconventional threats, we can't be constrained by conventional command protocols. Also agreed. Sarah smiled as she realized that her recruitment evaluation had ended with her becoming exactly the kind of commander the Apex Hegemony needed, someone who could redefine the nature of conflict itself. 6 months later, the Unconventional Threat Response Division had established a reputation throughout the galaxy for solving impossible military challenges through innovative approaches that consistently avoided traditional warfare. They had mediated conflicts between energy beings and matter-based civilizations by developing communication protocols that functioned across dimensional barriers. They had resolved territorial disputes between hive mind species and individual consciousness civilizations by creating hybrid governmental structures that accommodated both organizational frameworks. They had prevented wars between technological and biological civilizations by developing cooperation frameworks that allowed both types of development to proceed without interference. Commander Sarah Chen stood in her office aboard the UTRD flagship, reading reports from operations across 17 different star systems, and reflected on the journey that had brought her from agricultural volunteer to galactic peacekeeping authority. The galaxy had underestimated humanity's capacity for adaptive thinking, just as the Apex Hegemony had underestimated her potential when she first applied for military service. But more importantly, she had learned that the most effective military strategy was often to find ways to make warfare unnecessary. Her door chimed, and Senth entered carrying a data crystal that glowed with the encryption markers of high-priority intelligence. Commander, we've received a priority request from Hegemony Central Command. There's a situation developing in the core worlds that conventional forces can't handle. What kind of situation? A species that exists partially outside normal space-time. They're not hostile, but their presence is causing reality distortions that threaten multiple star systems. Conventional military doctrine has no protocols for handling entities that can alter physical laws by existing. Sarah smiled as she realized that once again, they were being asked to solve the impossible. Assemble the team, Senth. It sounds like we have another opportunity to rewrite the rules. As her team prepared for their next mission, Sarah reflected on the fact that she had achieved something she had never expected. She had become proof that humanity's greatest military asset wasn't strength or technology, or tactical brilliance. It was the uniquely human ability to look at any situation and ask, what if we're thinking about this completely wrong? The galaxy was vast, full of threats that couldn't be defeated through conventional means and challenges that required solutions no one had ever imagined. But humanity had given the Apex hegemony something it had never possessed before: the ability to transform any conflict into an opportunity for cooperation, any threat into a potential alliance, and any impossible challenge into a chance to evolve beyond the limitations of traditional thinking. Commander Sarah Chen had become the apex predator of military strategy, not because she could destroy her enemies, but because she could consistently find ways to turn them into allies. The galaxy would never be the same.